Okay, so let me introduce our first guest for this session, Lia Duran Mogolon. Sorry if I misspelled your name. From Ziegen, and I guess we'll talk about Literaturbureau in Düsseldorf and Bonn. Yes? So please have your time.
Okay.
One water.
So, good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Lia. I'm a research assistant working for the Department of Sociology at the University of Siegen. Okay, thank you. Yep. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I'm a research assistant working for the Department of Sociology at the University of Siegen. What I'm presenting to you today is a working paper because I've done most of the data collection, but I'm still going through my data and coding and trying to decide if I need one or two more interviews. Essentially what this is a case study of the literary events organized by a local office called Literaturhaus in Bonn. Just very briefly, the Literaturhaus is part of a broader network which operates throughout Germany. And these networks they have offices and dependencies in several German cities. The closest one to Bonn is the larger Literaturbüro NRW, which is for the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. And what they do is essentially they have different kinds of events. So they have workshops and encounters for local writers and artists, but they also invite European writers for readings. So they have this kind of exchange. That's basically where Bonn is located. As you see, center-west Germany, very close to the borders with Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. I don't think we have a lot of time to talk about Bonn, but just very briefly mentioning, this was the former capital of Germany, and it has a relatively high percentage of people with migrant background, around 30%, according to the city's statistical office. So my method and the whole study is rooted on the sociological theories of cultural production from Pierre Bourdieu and Howard Becker. So that's basically the root of the study. We can get on to the details of these theoretical backgrounds later, because I don't think I'll have time to get too much into this. And the methodology has been a very, very simple qualitative interactionist methodology. Essentially, it's been a snowball sampling where I've been contacting people and attending events and doing document analysis and then coding, recoding, making more contacts, and so on and so forth. And this is basically how this has been working. I started doing this in around September 2016 until now. So where I'm presenting are my preliminary findings of these different kinds of qualitative data, document analysis, participant observations, and my memos, some informal conversations, and a couple of semi-structured interviews. So a couple of the guiding questions have been basically about the cooperating actors and their imaginaries in this kind of literary office and the people getting together in these events. How the events such as Literatur d'Europe and von hier aus, which is translated to English, would be like from here outwards, more or less. And how these kind of events create a narrative of the city or Europe and Germany. Well, just listed my sources very briefly. In case anybody is interested, I can share the presentation, basically the flyers, websites, the social media publications, and the people that I have spoken to, two writers, a publisher, members of the association, and one of the coordinators of the Literaturhaus. Just a very a very brief comment on the Literaturhaus. This is organized as an association, which means this is a civil society initiative. People pay membership fees, and they elect a board of directors. They elect a couple of people who actually have a salary, but most of the people involved are essentially from civil society, people who share an interest in literature. This is a very, very common feature in Germany. So everybody is in some kind of association. In German, they're called Verein. So if you like football, then you join the football association in your neighborhood. So it's a very important feature for networking and social capital in Germany. That's something I wanted to mention, so that we more or less understand how this is thought. So it's not the state that created this office, but rather it's a civil society organization. They get nonetheless some help from the state. These were the events that I attended. So this Literatur de Europa, it's a series of lectures that is organized in coordination with the local office of the European Commission in Bonn. And it takes place more or less every 4 months. Each time they select the country of the country that is currently occupying the presidency of the European Council, and they invite one author so that this person reads some of his texts in original language, and then it's translated into German. Then there was another event called Ankommen in Bonn. This means like arrived in Bonn, and this was a children's book written about a child refugee. And it was a very important event. The mayor of the city was there, a lot of public authorities. They also invited some of the people who were working with the refugees in Bonn. They wanted to kind of contrast this idea of being born there and making this your home, like with time. And the other series of events was von hier aus. This is a regional authors forum that takes place like every couple of months, and Poetrypolis, that was an event about poetry, about hope in different languages in December 2016. I started having informal conversations and slowly started to extract quotes and like important narratives out of this and attending the events. Initially, first of all, one of my first findings was that my idea was to do this study with the Literaturhaus in Bonn and also in Düsseldorf. But very quickly I realized that the quotes and the categories emerging were very, very similar for both. So I decided to just focus on one of them in Bonn. That's why my abstract says both, but I slowly started to realize that the categories were repeating themselves and it was not really bringing any further data to do both of them. So I just focused on Bonn. Initially, I kind of identified like 3 regional geographical labels, which were the local, the national, and the European. However, the very important one is the local. So the document analysis and the memos that I wrote, the events, they show that the local means Bonn, and it means the surroundings. So for the people of this region call themselves Rheinlander, and this is something very, very important for their identity, that they come from the Rhine area, wherever Carnival is celebrated and people kind of spend time at the Rhine. So it means the area of Bonn, Cologne, Königswinter, Siebengebirge, so all the hills around the city. And there is a very strong interest in organizing events for these local authors. Now, the way this is told, however, the idea, the way the local is constructed is not just going like to a very distant past, but rather Bonn and local Rhineland is associated with multiculturalism. So it's basically everybody's here, everybody's welcome. Bonn as an international city. That was one of a very strong quotes that emerged, and the fact that this book release about the refugee child and the constant attempts to integrate this new the new faces arriving at Bonn in these events was very telling. It's associated with Bonn as a former capital, Bonn as a city rich in culture and nature. One of the people from the audience that I spoke to said, well, this is the city where the UN and the organizations are, so that really means something. There are many migrants in Bonn and many, many languages. And this is a person who was born and raised in Bonn, around 60 years old, was a member of the association. He always goes to the events with his wife. And this is their understanding of Bonn. So it's a city of the world. Bonn als neues Zuhause, so Bonn as new home. That was a very important topic as well, mentioned during the interviews and mentioned during the events. There was one particular comment that I just very briefly wanted to share with you. So we try to organize things related to the city. Like, for example, the migrant, and there was a pause, flaws. Then she commented on the site, I really don't want to call this a crisis. They are part of our city now. This is the interview that I had with one of the organizers, the coordinators of the association. And this narrative of integrating, incorporating, was very, very strong and very, very powerful throughout the presentations. It's also very present in the flyers and the things that people told. So this is something that I really wanted to stop in, because this is a narrative which is very important in the German cultural sector in general. So not just for this association, but this is a very important narrative in the German cultural sector and even in German politics. So the constant narrative of integrating, opening. So the idea is that this should be open and that this should kind of bring people together, and that the local and the sense of belonging is really not fixed upon like some very distant past. So when they are celebrating the Rhineland and highlighting the local, it's not about, for example, they're not reading Goethe or they're not reading Schiller, but rather they are very much into the new authors. And inviting authors with migration background is also a very important thing. Inviting authors who maybe were born elsewhere but grew up in Bonn or grew up in the Rhineland. So they call this the adoptive kids, the adopted children of the Rhineland. And the narrative is very, sets a lot of emphasis on the idea of how these people, these adopted kids of the Rhineland, are kind of also creating the face of the city and are part of the identity. So the fact that the UN is mentioned, the fact that the international organizations are mentioned when I've asked like the interviewees about the city. So what is it about Bonn? What is it about the Rhineland? Yes, the carnival, it's huge, but there are these other aspects. Interestingly enough, the national kind of faded away. So I thought it was, at the beginning, I thought this is going to be important because they invite the winners of the Leipzig book prize, but it fades away. So the national, this kind of narrative, it's really not that important. It's mostly about the city. And the European. The European is becoming more and more important. So they have this series of events, as I mentioned, Literatur d'Europa. And this implies not only inviting authors so that they read, but this implies that they translate their text and that the Literaturhaus, as the civil society organization, is in permanent contact with similar organizations in Europe. So one of the things they mentioned is that they have to contact the people from the other associations. So, for example, this year one of the authors invited was from Malta, and the coordinator said, "Look, I don't know about this country, so I have to call their arts council," and they recommend someone, and then we recommend someone as well. So these chains of cooperations that start to go across borders, I found very, very interesting. And the idea of Europe, the association of Europe with diversity, with cultural richness, with community, despite the fact that there's a sense, okay, we don't know a lot about Malta or many other European countries, maybe not about Spanish literature, but there's a sense we should know this is interesting, and that diversity in itself as an asset. The main actors that I identified involved very much the state, in the form of these arts councils, in the form of grants as well, and inevitably there's a need of those. The European Union, represented by Creative Europe, which is also putting a lot of resources there and trying to bring in this kind of diversity. The experts, the institutes abroad, the publishers, the city as an actant, and Europe as an actant, as very important symbolic actants. The implied actors that were not that present there, were more like passive actors, were the readers and the media. Basically, what I found, just to briefly comment on this, is that the chains of cooperations are crossing national borders, and this is a necessity that's created by globalization, by the sense I need to be translated in order to acquire like this kind of symbolic capital. The association of Europe as the European as a symbolic value in itself. And also basically that these events represent what Bourdieu would say the autonomous pole of cultural production. So the market was not very present there. You do not find best-selling authors there, but rather like this starting. So in a very Bourdieusian sense, the state kind of pulling in with the authors, trying to create these spaces of encounter, of recognition. Also the state and the institution in itself as a very powerful actor in terms of giving symbolic value, because this act of inviting someone to an event and letting them read their part of their novel it grants a very important symbolic value. So the people who attend this and the members of the association assume, well, this is a person who is a good writer. And this is something that's also granted at the national level by the institutions who recommend this or this other person. So basically, the importance of this organization, where I realized the importance of these organizations as gatekeepers, as taste makers in the process of socially creating symbolic meaning and making artwork circulate, and how this is all also influenced by the local authorities, the embeddedness in local networks. So this institute is very much embedded, has a very strong network of cooperation with museums, with the university, with the Creative Europe, and that is also how they manage to get around, but it also influences the kind of choices that they make. So I have to close down now, but if anybody is interested in talking more about this, we can definitely talk later. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, thank you for a very interesting presentation and keeping in time. So, the next one, our guest from France, Eleanor. Yes, please introduce yourself.
So, I should stand up because I have lots of maps, so it would be better. And that is how it works, okay. So, Hello everyone, I'm Eleanor from France, from French National Center of Scientific Research. Can you hear me well? Yes, it's okay. So today I will present you my recent study on local area characteristic and arts growth in French city of Arles. So here we go. Here we can see, sorry, how can I just show, just to have a small light, just to show on maps, do you have these? Okay. So here you can see the map of France, and here on the south you can see the city of Arles. It's a rather small city. And this is my case study focus on this city. So why the city of Arles is well known in the world? First, and before all, because of these Roman and Romanesque monuments. Here you can see the view of Arles, and in the center of the city we can see the Roman arenas, just like in Rome, and several very ancient ruins. And here is the Rhone river. So as you can see, it's rather small, and it's very marked by ancient history. So it is protected by UNESCO as World Heritage. Next, why it's well known? It's because of Van Gogh's paintings. Van Gogh spent some time in Arles. So he created several very famous paintings in Arles, and that is why everyone can see the paysage, the city view of Arles in the museums. In United States, in Russia, in Paris, everywhere you can see these paintings and think of this city. Third cause why Arles is well known is Camargue Nature Park. It's less known than Van Gogh's paintings, whereas it's a very protected and very unique French national nature area with very unique species of animals and birds living there. And it's very protected because of its unique ecological, local ecological system. Then the next thing about Arles is that in the past it was small, but however very industrial city. So since the first decades of the 20th century, the local economy of Arles was empowered by the presence of Paris-Lyon Mediterranean Railway Company. And then it was closed down 30 years ago. So there are several Arles-based companies that empowered cities. It gave the places to the people just to work. And now all of them are closed. Several local fabrics, such as, for instance, the fabrics working on salt, were also closed down. So we can see now actually the massive loss of jobs, economic decline, and lots of social problems. So that is why it's very interesting as a case study, because it's worldwide known because of several cultural characteristics. At the same time, it became very precarious, very difficult economic situation there. And then I will talk about the new changements that will come in this context. That's why I want to attract your attention to this dichotomy between the culture and the destroyed local economy. So Arles today is one of the poorest French agglomerations, with very high rate of unemployment, with very low income households. So people in Arles tend to vote for the radical left or radical right political parties. And according to French National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies, the city of Arles concentrates that they call pockets of great precariousness. So very high percentages, or over 30% of inhabitants of Grand Arles. Grand Arles, it's the small city of Arles and the agglomeration, the surrounding neighborhood. So they are living in very poor conditions. So what do the local authorities try to do after the deindustrialization of the city of Arles? They tried to create something new in the cultural area, in the cultural domain, just to attract the new people. They tried to give the new cultural meanings and the new urban ambiances related to the old Roman and Romanesque monuments. Here you can see very famous toreador Jose Maria Manzanares, just in arenas of Arles during the corrida. So it's one of the very famous events that attracts tourists and lots of people in Arles. So the city has also invested in immersive cultural amenities like the museums, the libraries, several international cultural events. So the challenges of this new cultural policy was to attract investments, businesses, creative people in order to boost the economic attractivity of the city and to create something new which will substitute the ancient industrial past of the city. Just through culture, do something new, attract new people, new businesses, and create the new image of the city. So, however, these companies, these institutions attracted some new people in Arles, but proportionally it was not sufficient just to do the radical changement. So even though it worked, but it's not worked sufficiently well just to transform the city's existing problems. And then now there is a local revolution that comes, something new. Here you can see Maya Hoffman, and here is Frank Gehry. Maya Hoffman is a heiress of a very great fortune of La Roche Hoffman pharmaceutical company. She spent her childhood in Arles, whereas she's from Switzerland, but her father was a scientific. He studied the animals of Camargue natural area. So she spent her childhood in Arles region. And now she wants to offer to her favorite city, to city of her childhood, something new. And this new thing will be this tower. It's 56-meter sparkling like mirror tower designed by Frank Gehry, very famous Canadian-born, America-based architect. This tower will include the Luma Foundation, named after the kids of Maya Hoffman, like Lucas and Marina. And this is a foundation that Maya Hoffman founded in 2003. This is foundation. It's about culture, about protecting of human rights and nature. So it's based in Swiss, but its main building will be here in Arles. And you can see it's very in proximity with the old monuments, so it will be a great contrast, something new aesthetically, something new ideologically. Another important thing about the Luma Foundation that it's dissociated from the local cultural policies. I was talking about them just several seconds ago. So there is nothing about, there is no link with this cultural policy and the Luma Foundation. And the Luma Foundation is not associated to the urban regeneration plan. It's like an autonomous, powerful structure, but independent from its immediate cultural environment. So, yes, it's entirely financed by Maya Hoffman. And the local mayor of the city, Hervé Schiavetti, just found himself, as he said to the journalists, on a cloud, because this great thing that arrives to his city and can resolve potentially some problems with that he has to deal every day. So there is no obstacles from the local, whereas Luma Foundation is dissociated from the local policy, there is no conflict between this association and the policy of the mayor of the city. So around the future tower by Frank Gehry, you can see here, as I said in the beginning, Arles was very famous by the railway yard. And then it was closed, and then it was like distracted. So here you can see these ruins of this railway yard. And around the tower of Frank Gehry, there is the reconstruction of this railway yard, just create there like artistic hub. Very grand scale artistic hub, exposition center, and so on and so forth. Here you can see Maya Hoffman and her team, international team from museums, from organizations mainly from United States of America, but also Great Britain, German, Swiss, Sweden, so it's very international. So here we can think in terms of Pierre Welch and his archipelago theory. One increasingly has the impression of an archipelago economy in which horizontal, frequently transnational relations increasingly outmatch traditional vertical relation. So, as you know, in France, the system of cultural institution and cultural policy is very hierarchical and very centered on the French Ministry of Culture. So with this kind of initiative, which is highly international, there is new kind of horizontal relation that will be built between the city of Arles and the other centers of modern art. Here you can see the building that before the work associated to the Lumo Foundation and what it was when Arles was flourishing industrial city. So the Lumo Foundation will be open next year, but here you can see the detailed plan of how it would be. So you can see here the tower, here Parc des Ateliers is the railway atelier. Here it will be a big park, like a natural area, and here a small artificial lake just to reflect because it's very sunny Arles. So the tower will be reflected in this lake just to create something new, something very contemporary image. Now it's look like this. As you can see, it's under construction. We can see several expositions that were in the rooms of the parks of ateliers that are already reconstructed and ready for this. So when we think about this case, it is a pretty rare case of urban reconstruction. We are thinking about another case of Bilbao effect. So it's also Frank Gehry building, and that changed a lot the city of Bilbao. And so we are asking ourselves if here in Arles we will see the new Bilbao effect or not. Maya Hoffman, in her interview, told that it could be even greater than Bilbao effect, because the Lumo Foundation, it's not like museum. It's like an artistic hub. It's the place of exposition, but also the place of creation. So the ambition of the Lumo Foundation is even higher and even more expansive than the ambition of Bilbao Museum, which is great from the architectural viewpoint, but it's like a museum and it's reduced to the museum function. So what I will present now, it's a cartographical analysis of some changement before and after Lumo Foundation project. So are there any correlation between cultural resources and economic development of the city? And could the cultural amenities become drivers of the place-oriented economic performance? And how we could measure it? So methodology, it's ethnography I'm actually working on, and several cartographic analyses that are present now. So here you can see the city of Arles with the cultural resources. It's like in different colors you can see the neighborhood. It's smaller than a postal code. It's very small analysis on the iris level. So you can see here the arenas and here the Lumo Foundation. And you can see that most of cultural amenities are actually in the Arles downtown, and the peripheral neighborhoods are either empty or either deserted from the cultural viewpoint. So if we compare the distribution of workers in before the Lumo Foundation project in 2006, you can see that several neighborhoods here are pretty worker neighborhood, whereas in the center of the city, where we can see lots of cultural resources, we have not so much workers. So there is weak correlation between the presence of workers and the culture. Then when we see the distribution of workers in 2013, we can see like gentrification of this area. If we compare before and after, it's pretty evident. So we can see that there is this kind of gentrification. So when we analyze foreigners in 2006, we can see that there are mainly two neighborhoods which are very rich on the presence of foreigners. In 2013, we can see that there is so much new foreigners that are coming in this area. I can't present now the regression analysis that I've done, but it shows that it's mainly educated and graduated foreigners that are coming in Arles these last years. There is something new. Next, it doesn't work. Shall I continue here? There is a technical problem. Could you just okay. So it was the case of foreigners. Now when we analyze the spatial distribution of educational level, graduated people and young people, in 2006 we can see they are mainly concentrated here in the historical area of the city. And after the Lumo Foundation, we can see the bigger expansion of young and educated people. And if you were attentive, you can see that there are more educated and young people in this area, but they are not correlated with two neighborhoods that were mainly associated with the workers. So there is like a special stratification in Arles that changed, but still there is something that is pretty anchored in the city social landscape. So when we analyze a relation between the housing occupation status and social economical characteristic of the population in Arles, we can see the positive correlation between real estate owners and business owners, intermediary profession, employees, and without profession. Among tenants, the positive correlation is with retired people, white collars, and workers. And public housing is mainly occupied by retired people and workers. So this kind of regression analysis gives us this idea of how the city is occupied by different socio-professional categories of people. So now we can see that these downtown areas are mainly small residences of 30-40 square meters. So the young, educated people which are coming in our downtown and who are mainly tenants, they tend to live in smaller apartments. Whereas here, in the more peripheral neighborhood, and the Lumo Foundation is here, we can see the bigger residences. So the new dynamic of this neighborhood is mainly associated with bigger residences. So there is new local estate market buzz, new energies associated to the aesthetic of Frank Gehry building. So we can see that here is a listing of the apartment, and they say it close to the cultural and architectural Parc des Ateliers, and you can see from this apartment the Tower of Frank Gehry. And this will impact the overall price and the image of this apartment, its attractivity, and we can see the multiple examples of this new buzz created by these aesthetics. So there are several elements that show some new transformation, but next time I will show some more detailed results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you very much.
For the end, Professor Woblecki of Kraków, he will tell us something about his research into libraries.
Now let's imagine that we travel to Kraków. Last year in Kraków we completed a study and survey commissioned by the municipality. We did it in the Małopolska Institute of Culture. It was a challenge in terms of studies as far as circumstances are concerned, because it was a difficult political moment. This survey was about conversion of certain independent libraries into one single municipal or urban organism or body known as the Library Kraków. With lots of tension and our client making its expectations very clear, we were anticipating quite a lot of objection from the librarian community and nic się nie zmieniło, tak mówię dla tych, którzy dopiero weszli, taka krótka kontekstowa analiza. So we kicked off with a survey, very much like the previous surveys, high quality ethnographic surveys run in all local library branches involving such tools. We've already seen such tools, GIS analysis and the ArcGIS program. You will be soon hopefully seeing the results of our work and the basic theoretical category. Czy słyszą, jak Państwo wolą? Now, the basic or fundamental analytical category was quite popular. The third place idea or concept of olden books, which is very popular among Polish librarians at the ideological level. The question is, can the library be a third place? Because according to the olden book theory, can they also be a third place or third places in a large city? We have cases of much support or grants, such as Gates Foundation, support for small cities. We have the fascination of the library as the third place in terms of the university library and librarians employed there, but we appear to know little about what a common library branch can be. So the start point was something that the library can actually have the role of a third place. We defined it. Third place, according to Olden Book, the third place is between the living space and working space, a place of workplace or the home, a place where you can meet other people, your colleagues or your friends, and do different things. If we look at the more broader sense of the place, there are 4 additional categories of places. We have the third place as a start point, and a very clear ideological point of access. So everybody's dreaming for the library to become a third place. But when we think about the libraries, about the library as a public space, in the spirit of Habermas, is this a place to come and have a debate, a political debate, not necessarily a national debate, but take part in a debate about the civic budgets and debate with local politicians. It may also be a meeting place, a hub, really. There are librarians, there will be ICT tools, and this or other people can tell us about other things happening around the city, as well as Wi-Fi and getting access to the website. And last but not least, this category will probably bounce back later on. This is a place with easily accessible place with no barriers. I will be coming back to this category. The research was highly intensive. They were ethnographic and spent from September through December. We visited 58 branches, library branches, to run one-day observation at the so-called post-occupancy evaluation. We talked to the workers, to the staff, and the users, and we treated libraries as certain centers access or hubs access by people, and we're asking people about neighbors, were they using the library or not. So that was kind of a talk based on interviews. And it was about non-reading, really. And then the in-depth phase, we ran a full-day observation in different libraries. We used several variables. What was important for us, it was the architecture, the scale of the building, and the last repair work. And phase 3, participatory survey, talking to readers. We had an architect among us in our team, and we were thinking of different solutions, which solution would meet the challenge of the place, of the circumstances. Now, expert meetings with managers or heads of the old libraries, amalgamated into the single library Kraków, and we also met a representative from the Rajska library. This is the Wojewódzki Provincial Library in Kraków. In phase 3, we allowed for modules or blocks for librarians, and to close it down, we had the Forum of the Future of Kraków Districts. This is again a grassroots initiative, and we presented the results of our survey there. Very briefly, the conclusions of our survey, what's important from what I'm talking about today, thinking about the library as a third place and the potential associated with it. The results of the in-depth survey and one-day observation exercise, we can see that the visit to a library is a short one, 5 minutes, borrow a book. And I'm not going to refer to any recommendation. The truth is, or the fact is, that 95% of the visits is just brief borrowing business, and it's a very, very peculiar way. There is a whole range of customers. We also had an opportunity to talk to homeless people who have a read of a local newspaper and then have a 45-minute nap and then leave the library. Children, we talked to parents of children, and also old, the elderly senior citizens, old age pensioners. What we found was that this place is visited by all social categories, quite unique perhaps in Kraków. Then a relationship between the librarian and the user. American literature defines librarians as human Google, so the human version of the Google machine. The browsing element, you simply decode the reader. Lady libraries would identify the reader, recognize the preferences, and offer a solution in the form of a book. I'll be back to this. Now, this is a next thing, situation and the localization. You won't see it in the map, but we call it a shame location. When we think about the library, and this is the main challenge to the library Kraków, what happens? Libraries are located in basements, in backyards, or even if they give you a window like this, you can see those blinds, vertical blinds, dating back to 1980s. I'll show you more of that. Otherwise, they may be located, but they are invisible in a way. Now, I already mentioned the short time of a visit. What's also, I find it very inspirational, if Kraków wants to ensure that any person, it's not only the UNESCO capital of literature, the final key recommendation, think in the category of hybrid spaces, so virtual space combined with physical space. In Kraków, you need to visit the library once a month in order to get this old school strap with a code to the Legimi system, giving you infinite access to large resources, inclusive of Kindle. Kindle was excluded, but now it's included again. As the user of the library Kraków, for 1 month you'll be entitled to use the platform. In a month's time, you repeat the visit and get your access code again. We concluded with several recommendations, and I'm going to concentrate only on those related to the location, the place. We use the ArtKeys tool. We can see the catchment areas of the existing branches and the potential catchment or reach area for the branches, and it's based walkability criterion. We give ourselves 15-minute walking distance, including of pedestrian routes. We mark pedestrian routes on the map, only pedestrian routes, and you can see the density. And we are talking about 85% of the city population within a 15-minute walking distance from a library. So, based on our expert methodology, we developed a system that would give this availability to 95% of the population. Now, there's a new development. It's known as Rutaj estate, with a new library being constructed, Czyżyny, next to Nowa Huta. We also have the library bus, called the bibliobus or library bus. Now, accessibility is quite good. We're not sure about the bus, the library bus. Now, the problem starts with visibility. That's what typical libraries in Kraków look like. We took more than 5,000 photographs, inclusive of the vicinity, the sort of neighborhood around. Please bear in mind that in addition to this survey, we transferred some data from SOVA, from the SOVA system, the old system. We put it on our system, and even in those central locations in Królowej Jadwigi streets, 30% of the users are people who live in Skawina, because normally on the way to Skawina or from Skawina to work, they may simply get off. We propose stop and read for mobile users. There are no car park spaces, though. It's very difficult to be attracted by this type of solution. If you look at the data, the proximity of the library has absolutely no consequence whatsoever on the preference. So we have the reading neighbors, non-reading neighbors, reading residents, non-reading residents, and each library outlet has been screened. So if you live 15 minutes from the library, it has no consequence for your reading or non-reading preference. And it appears to be a challenge to be faced in terms of the grid. What we proposed was the so-called medium-range library. So very much like the first contact doctor, we have first contact library. We did not allow for winding up the library network, like in Wrocław. That's what happened in Wrocław. We still keep 56 libraries in Kraków, and that wouldn't be according to the administrative division of the city into districts, remote central, and this is one of the libraries after an overall with very nice coffee machines and the other infrastructure. And that's the outside, the exterior. It's hidden. The library is hidden. It's somewhere on the estate in the shopping mall or shopping center. Functions. We reviewed the so-called hardcore readers, and we asked them about the future role or roles of the library. Unfortunately, the books are associated with the typical book functions, and then the real life. So the question is, how would you like to use the library, and how do you actually use the library? They would like to meet friends, they would like to know about cultural events, but they don't do that, actually. So to recap, it's not the third place, it's a place with low intensity of meeting or visits. So with this low intensity of visits, you can meet a homeless person as much as your neighbor or a colleague. A third place appears to be a utopian concept. Currently, these library branches in Kraków are an institutional outlet with a low intensity of meeting. It's unlike the civic centers. Libraries still have an opportunity to give access to a very wide range of users. Thank you very much, and sorry for confusion.
I'm sorry again, he's not speaking in the mic, please. However, he's just announcing a break, coffee break, with snacks. We will not prolong. You can talk to the presenters during the break if they are ready to spend half an hour for a personal discussion with you. Thank you very much for your attention. In half an hour we will start another session. And now, help yourselves.